Hello, my name's David Dungay and welcome to UC Summit 2022. I have with me here Russ, Chadinha, Senior Director of Solution Marketing at 8x8. Welcome to the show, Russ. How are you?
Hey, David. Thanks for having me. Well, thank you. It's great. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Well, today's session is titled Optimizing Remote and Hybrid Workforces. Before we get into that conversation though, Russ, can you give us a very quick rundown of yourself and 8x8?
Yeah, absolutely. So David, I'm responsible for solution and industry marketing at 8x8. And what 8x8 does is it's providing what we call the experience communication platform. So it's taking your business phone, your team chat, your video, your contact center, your APIs and embeddable applications, and your all the analytics that are associated with that, and provides those to organizations on one easy-to-use platform.
Fantastic. So, hybrid working, remote working, two of the biggest trending topics of 2022. Tell me, Russ, what are the biggest challenges for businesses implementing a hybrid working strategy in 2022, and how has that changed over the last sort of 12 months or so?
Yeah, David, that's a big question. How much time do we have? But I'm going to boil it down to a single word, and that's precision. I think that's the biggest challenges that organizations have in 2022. And it's around three areas. It's precision around where they deploy a hybrid workforce. It's precision around communication and policies, and then it's precision around the technology. And let's look at each of those just real quickly. If you think about hybrid today, it's not an intent; it's here to stay. And if we look at the UK, for example, McKinsey did some great research and said about 33% of roles can be remote without a loss in productivity, and that's mainly due to having a strong business and financial services sector of the economy. But that's different for industries, and it's different for countries. So, for example, education, where we saw it can work well for older students, like in higher education, but does not work well for younger students, and it doesn't work well for things like further education, where hands-on training is needed for things like welding. So businesses need to be very precise about the workflows, the tasks, the job descriptions, and how those align with their hybrid working strategy to ensure that those employees have a chance for success. If we move on to this idea of let's say communication and transparency and precision there, right? It's time now for organizations to be very specific about the roles, the policies, and the topics and the timing. So if we think about policies, for example, the policies need to be clearly stated. They need to be supportive of how can we enable that human connection? How do we enable career growth even in a hybrid environment? How do we ensure they're empowered to drive a work-life balance? And how do we ensure everyone's overall wellness? And then finally, we think about the technology about it. So what's interesting is Gartner did some research and they found that 59% of employees would agree their organizations have empowered them to work remotely at the same level as if they were in the office, which means 41% don't agree to that. And so we have to make sure that we're precise about giving the employees the tools that they need to actually be successful. And so if you think, what's changed? And why is 2022 differently? And I will propose is two things. It's acceptance and speed of change. So if you think about acceptance, where people are now, we were going through the pandemic and everybody was pretty accepting of whatever, to get through it. But now through experience and education, we have examples. We know now what's possible, so that acceptance is waning, and so they need that precision. And the last thing is speed of change. When you look at what happened, right, a lot of the literature is, it's 5x acceleration in digital transformations, et cetera. So that we know a lot has changed, but it's not going to slow down. It's actually going to accelerate more from here, which will surprise people. Again, I'll lean on some McKinsey research, which they found that business leaders believe 50% of their revenues between now and 2026, so just in the next 5 years, will come from products, services, and businesses that don't exist today. And so that's a massive amount of change still coming our way, and the ride ahead is going to be an exciting adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're absolutely right. There is going to be a lot of change this year. So, I mean, for those businesses that might be watching today, I think nearly every business has implemented some form of hybrid working strategy. But where should they look to tweak the existing strategy, if you like, for this year?
Yeah, and because we everybody does have a kind of a bag of tricks if they think about how they've supported their hybrid workers, but it really is going to be around this idea of let's look at the technology, let's look at decision intelligence, and I've got an interesting proposal for businesses here in a second. Let's look at that employee experience, and then let's look at real estate optimization and the experiences that we're having there. And so that's what I would propose for folks. But today we have to make sure that each role has the communication tools and technology that it needs to deliver its outcomes, and that will require some rationalization about what investments have been made. The second thing is when we think about decision intelligence, and I'd like to introduce, David, the new decision intelligence tools for businesses, the phone call. And you can say, okay, a modern communications system, and let's take an incoming phone call, for example. There are 8 ways to handle that phone call. And each of those interactions generate data. Now, what a communications platform should be doing for them is it should be aggregating that data, it should be transforming it so it's usable, and it should be presenting it. But what happens then is it should be presenting it in 5 information types, which is descriptive, what happened, diagnostic, what broke and how to fix it, predictive, what's possible, prescriptive, best next action, and cognitive, intelligent automation. And each of those pieces of data then, or that types of information, can drive one of 3 types of business outcomes. I can automate basic functionality such as reporting. With a click, I can then generate a report based on the information from that phone call and those 8 ways that we handle it. I can now go from insight to operational action in seconds because I'm getting real-time feedback, for example, in call queues, and my hold times increasing just from the incoming phone calls, and I can take immediate action. And the third one is strategic planning. So as we think about intelligent automation and automating workflows and tasks and reallocating human resources, that takes strategic planning. And it requires then intelligence and information on how to do that effectively. All of that information comes from an incoming phone call on a modern communications platform. And clearly companies aren't taking advantage of that today. Employee experience, of course, that's the fourth thing. Let's look at the experience, and companies should look at that to ensure that how employees are empowered is actually driving to the outcomes that they want and is able to support and adjust to these new products, services, and businesses that they're putting in place. And then, of course, optimizing real estate. We already see business leaders now looking at their portfolio and how can they reduce that cost, and then how do they make sure that the environment within what exists remains productive regardless of where the hybrid worker is located.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everyone is looking at productivity right now, aren't they? I mean, I think some people are possibly being over-productive in some instances. But I mean, let's look at maybe some common pitfalls. And we are going through this time of change. We are becoming more data-centric, or a lot of businesses are becoming more data-centric. What are some of the common pitfalls that you see businesses fall into when it comes to implementing this hybrid strategy?
Yeah, well, and first is congratulations to everyone to getting to this point. It's an understatement to say it hasn't been easy, and well done to everyone to be here. As we think about what happened prior to the pandemic, what we found was about 71% of organizations had between 2 and 5 communication applications. Another 22% had 6 or more. So they came into the pandemic with this heterogeneous environment for communications. And we just did some research with the UK public sector, for example, and 55% of those organizations indicated they have even more communication applications now than they did prior to the pandemic. So one of the pitfalls that we see that's common and it seems to be difficult for organizations to kind of put the right priority on is rationalizing their communications portfolio through an enterprise architecture lens. And what that means then is they're still giving the hybrid worker a bag of tools and applications, and they're not rationalizing it, which means then that they're suboptimizing the hybrid worker's productivity and their experience. They're absolutely suboptimizing and not taking advantage fully of the cost savings that are there. And in many cases, we're seeing companies go from 9 applications down to 1. And they're not taking full advantage of the data. We talked about that decision intelligence. They just don't have access to it because it's locked up in those different applications. So those are some of the pitfalls that we're seeing. That it's certainly solvable. As companies modernize that environment, then they can ensure simplicity with a single application. They can ensure simplicity and lower cost with a single application, and they can ensure and they unlock all that data.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk about 2022 and the year ahead. What are the major themes for you this year? I mean, is it all about integrating workflows? I mean, you've mentioned employee experience and customer experience there as well, or is it going to be about something else?
Yeah, David. I think of it's 2 things in 2022. There's this maniacal focus on profitable growth, and of course that's it's every year. But this year it's especially true as we come out of survival. Organizations are really trying to drive profitable growth the best that they can. And the second thing is speed. And we haven't talked much about that today, but that really is what we see a lot of focus in on is how organizations trying to figure out how can they be more agile, more adaptable to change, and how can they drive the speed of decision-making, speed of execution, and speed of responsiveness, because that drives convenience within customer satisfaction. And again, if you lean on some McKinsey research, they found that fast organizations outperform their peers, and not by a little bit, by a wide margin, on a number of metrics, that includes profitability, organizational resilience, organizational health, and of course growth. So I think 2022 all about profitable growth and speed.
Fantastic. So from a technology innovation standpoint, we're seeing a lot of innovation right now. But I mean, where do you think what will have the biggest impact over the coming year or coming years from a tech point of view, and how will that impact the hybrid working workplace?
Yeah, that's such a fun question, David, because there are examples like can we give remote workers a 3D printer, and then they become a spare parts manufacturing hub in their house, and then they attach that spare part to a drone that then delivers it to the the location in their area. And I think there are examples like that that indicate the future is going to be so much fun for all of us. But let me give you 4 that are really specific to communications. I think AR, VR, XR is going to be one. I'll talk about it in a second. I think practical AI will have a big impact. CPaaS will have a big impact, and then ecosystems. Those are the 4 that I think in the near term will have a significant impact. If we think of AR, VR, XR, we're seeing like manufacturing companies today are using that. So a hybrid worker, they can sit remotely. They can get the goggles to a customer in any location, and now they can remotely collaborate on product design, product feedback, and they can do that so it's fast, it's quick. So we're seeing massive improvement in product development cycles because we can use that technology to quickly collaborate with customers and engineers and suppliers. And so that's accelerating. And I think we'll see more of that. And we'll see things like applications, productivity applications, start to be used by AR, VR environments. So people will be more productive. And so hybrid will get supported through that technology. Same thing with AI. Back in 2018, Gartner found that globally, CIOs they said 4% of CIOs had some form of AI in production. In 2021, our research found that 70% of organizations have AI in production with their business communications. Another 26% were in the process of deploying it. So let's say 96, 97% of organizations now have AI in just 3 years deployed with their business communications. And that really enables a hybrid working environment because we can start to offload traditional high volume, let's call it redundant, not redundant, I'm sorry. I'll just rephrase that. It's high volume, transactional oriented phone calls and then the humans can now focus in on the nuanced, more complex topics. And AI, like digital assistants, are going to help them with that. If we look at CPaaS, Communications Platform as a Service, it's things like embeddable applications. So now we think about a hybrid work environment where I can embed a video meeting in my applications and my website. So it doesn't matter where I'm at, the customer or the prospect can instantly connect with me through a video meeting in their application experience, and it doesn't matter where I can be, and I can help them through that video experience. And then finally, when we think about ecosystems, companies now are realizing that they need to empower employees with relevant data at the speed of the conversation. So how do I take IoT platforms and CRM and ERP and service and support and integrate that with communications so that I can enable proactive support? For example, IoT notification allows me then, notifies the contact center, which I can then pull the support team and the customer together and actually create a service event before the machine goes down. And I think that technology and those ecosystems are going to have a significant impact in the short term.
I mean, some fantastic innovation going on in the market. It's going to be a fascinating year or next couple of years for sure. Look, Russ, I think that's a great place to end today's discussion. Thank you so much for joining me.
David, it's been a pleasure, as always, and we look forward to the next conversation.
Thank you. And thank you for watching. You've been watching me, David Dungay, at UC Summit 2022. Don't forget to go and have a look at the rest of the platform and, of course, 8x8's booth. You'll be able to find out a lot more about 8x8 and what's going on over there. So that's it for me. See you next time.